So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Cyberpunk 2077 has finally released, and quite honestly, there's a lot of discussion to be had around the visuals of this game. It's not as cut and dry as a lot of games in the past, where you have basic presets, basic settings, on and off. Well, there's a lot here. There's ray tracing, there's rasterized performance, there's Fidelity Fx contact adaptive sharpening. That's variable. As well as DLSS, that's auto, as well as being able to pick a selection. So we can't really just go, here's A, here's B. But what we're gonna do today, starting things off, we're gonna take the GeForce RTX 3060 Ti. It's the latest of the RTX lineup, and it's the lowest variant of the 30 series. And we're gonna run it against this game at 1080p, but it's primarily to take a look at the options and what's going on in the title, and to get an idea of where a 3060 Ti, or if you have a 2080 Super, what kind of performance you can expect from the game, as well as what really makes the big difference in tweaking. So, we fired up our test bench, which is up on the screen, and it's our test bench that we've been using and will be continuing to use, loaded into a static scene in the game, and I could talk about it or I could show you, so let's jump right into it. Alright, so here we are in the world of Night City, except it's more like the world of the settings right now. So I just want to go through kind of what the settings look like and everything. So we can go to our video tab, and you can see here we're at full screen, 1080p. And the point of this is to make sure that we have just a good scaling. We could go up higher resolutions and just intentionally try to kneecap the 3060 Ti, but we'll talk about those numbers later. But right now we just want to look at visual and performance scaling, kind of give you an idea of where you may want to try and shoot for, and what gives you kind of, a bang for the buck kind of preset. So I've got it set on the quick preset. So there are several. We'll look at all of those. But it's at Raytracing Ultra. We're going to roll through and look at the options here. So field of view is set to 80. I highly recommend changing that to 90, but for the purpose of testing and performance, whatever, we're going to leave it at 80 because that's default, and want to see how that does. So you got film grain, chromatic aberration, which I hate in this game, depth of field, lens flare, and motion blur. I don't really mind the motion blur in this one. It's not my favorite thing, but it does help smooth things out whenever you get into really intense situations. But it's up to you. If you don't like it, just turn it off. You got contact shadows, improved facial lighting geometry. I would always leave that on because you're going to be in people's faces a lot in this game. Your anisotropy at 16x, that's not going to really matter anything. But you got local mesh quality, local shadow quality, local shadow mesh quality, you can see there's a lot of emphasis on shadows through a lot of these, as well as volumetric fog, clouds. The clouds are kind of interesting because you're not going to see a whole lot of them very often, but you've got dynamic decals, screen space reflections, which are actually really good in this game. And you got ambient occlusion, color precision, mirror quality, very big in this one. And for the mirror quality. Level of detail, that's actually pretty cool because the game, you can see a lot in any given scene. Now, ray tracing gives you the option for ray tracing on or off. You got ray trace reflections, ray trace shadows. Reflections and shadows are either on and off. Ray trace lighting, you get the option to go from off, medium, ultra, and then psycho. And then you have DLSS. Now, DLSS in this title has an auto setting, which is really, really good. So honestly, switching between the different versions, I found auto to be most preferable. Dynamic Fidelity Fx CAS. Now, this is a really cool one because if you don't have DLSS and you have a card that doesn't utilize, so you got a non-RTX card, so you've got a Radeon or a GTX, this will give you the option to have a dynamic resolution as well as sharpening added to it. And then you've got static Fidelity FX, so you could just turn it on without the option to dynamically adjust the resolution. This is a great option if you don't have an RTX card. Now, let's before we look at Raytracing Ultra, we're going to go to low. I want to take a look at the game at low settings, and there it is. You get your shaders reset, but turn on the frame rate. So you got between 135 and 140 FPS at low, and it doesn't look too terrible. Now, this is one of the early sections in the game, and I felt this was a good scene to kind of be able to look at how the game looks. There's basically everything that would be adjusted is in this scene. So there's medium, so 135-ish, and let's go to our settings, And I like that you can change these settings without having to reset the game. So you can toy with them as you're playing. So medium jumps up the quality a bit. You can see a difference. So if you want to jump back on the timeline, you can see the difference there. But that drops it down to 115. You're still getting great performance on the 3060 Ti at 1080p. Again, we'll look at 1440p and other resolutions later, but right now this is where we're at. Let's jump up to high. You go from medium to high, and you're going to see, again, another step up in the visual quality. So your reflections get a little bit better, shadows get a little bit deeper, textures get better, but your performance drops down to under 100, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. You're still high frame rates in an RPG game that doesn't really rely on twitch mechanics and super high frame rates. Let's jump it on up to Ultra. Now, the next ones we'll get to RT. There's a couple things that go on in there that's really cool that I want to talk about. So Ultra, boom. Let it go to Ultra. There we are. Now we drop down to 83 FPS. You can see the jump, and you can see the distance at which shadows and reflections are going on down there get a lot better. You can see people way off in the direction. You can see cars moving in the way far distant backgrounds. Okay, so 80 FPS, 83. What happens when you turn on ray tracing? Let's see here. Go to ray tracing medium. So now let's scroll down here and see what ray tracing medium means. That means you get ray tracing on, but you're just going to get ray trace shadows and ray trace lighting. So you're not going to get the ray trace reflections. And it turns on DLSS to auto, which is fun. It's actually pretty cool. But we'll turn it off in just a second and see what kind of impact you really get there. So we were at 84, 85 FPS at Ultra with it off. And moving up to ray trace with medium, your frame and DLSS set to auto, your frame rate hasn't changed. It's really about the same, which is kind of cool. So they balance that out to where you can kind of get the minimal input. So you get your shadows. You can notice down there in the bottom section, the cars, the lighting is a little bit better down there. Your lighting is ray trace here. So, but what happens if you turn off DLSS? That way we can get an idea of what it really impacts the performance. So turning it off, you go down to 54 FPS. You drop under the 60. So that's actually pretty cool. So you go from 54 to 84 when you enable DLSS with this setting. That's a pretty big jump. That's 30 FPS. That's more than a 50% increase in performance by turning it on. Let's see. We're gonna get a little. We're gonna get a little fun, have a little fun here in just a moment. So ray tracing at Ultra. Sorry, I jumped out of that one. So ray tracing at Ultra, everything is cranked up. Now you did notice here, screen space reflections, you can go up to Psycho. That gives you a little bit extra show. And they did put a lot of love and care into the screen space effects here. So reflections are on, Ultra, Auto. Let's see where we end up. Now remember, this is 1080p. You're at 68 FPS. So when they said the RTX 3060 Ti and Cyberpunk 2077 RTX Ultra, well, there you go. They were right. It gets over 60 FPS. Now we know that at medium we got a 50% boost in performance by turning on DLSS. What do we get here when you turn it off? Let's see here. 43 FPS. So you take a 10 FPS hit at 1080p, 50 FPS down to 43. So 10%, 5%. Yeah, that's a pretty good jump. That's about a 20% performance hit by turning on the ray trace reflections. But look how good it looks off in the distance with the puddles down there. And they're not perfectly mirror reflection puddles. So that's something really cool here. They're hazy. They look like they should. The cars have reflections in the distance on the buildings, as well as where Masala Studios is. But let's see what happens without turning DLSS back on. Actually, you know what? We're going to leave DLSS off. We're going to go to Ultra. And this is the game as it is. So now what if you don't have an RTX features? If you don't want to run ray tracing and you want to get as much performance as possible, let's turn DLSS on to auto with all raster going. No ray tracing. What do you get here? What do you get? You get well over 100 FPS. You're back up to medium settings. So you get the same performance as if you had medium settings, but you're getting the ultra performance numbers here. And, well, what if you don't have DLSS as an option? What if you have to rely on Fidelity Fx? So let's take a look at that. So boom, Fidelity Fx. Let's see, we want to target 60 FPS. Let's say 60 FPS is fine. Actually, you know what? I'm going to turn that off. We're going to have a little fun here. Let's see. With it off and everything, we see 83, 84. But let's say I want to get 100 FPS. Let's say I want to target 100. Let's see what that looks like. So, turn Fidelity Cast FX back on. 100%. We're willing to drop to 80% to get 100 FPS. This is really fun. I kind of wish the DLSS Auto had this type of an option for you to kind of pick a range, but I think that's really cool. So let's see, can we get it back up to 100? So there we go. We got it to 100 FPS, but you can see the image is noticeably softer. So we're going to switch from here to DLSS just to give an idea. Boom, 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 boom. Oop, almost got the wrong one. DLSS Auto. There you go. Now it's up to you guys if you want to do a flip back and forth, take a look at it. I think the addition of those is really cool. So you can see here there's going to be a whole lot of testing to do. So this isn't going to be out in a day or two. So expect these results down the road. I hope to do a lot more than just 2 graphics cards, but you can see this is going to take a while. I just wanted to bring this to you guys and show you kind of what was going on, what maybe to expect with our testing. I do want to do just across the board. It's going to take a while. There's a lot going on in this game, and I don't want to rush it. I'd rather give you guys better results. Quite honestly, most of you are probably already playing the game, but either way, let me know in the comment section below. What do you hope for me to hit? What you don't want to see missed? And you know what? Maybe you just want to see what it can break. All right, guys, we'll catch you in the next one.